from the Daily Caller contrasting the two of those. Even the Federal Reserve is getting into the Brexit vote. The Federal Reserve says Brexit is a factor, and considering what it's going to do with interest rates, they're holding those to see what's going to go on. So we've seen this go over and over again. Washington Post says Britain's European Union vote could bring Cameron's government crashing down. So you got James Cameron's government could crash. The Federal Reserve would feel like they were impacted. The big German companies, as well as multinational corporations that are pushing these things through, they feel like they would be affected. The banks, of course, the banks. Do you think these people who have trillions of dollars at stake would orchestrate the murder of a young MP in order to win this thing? Of course they would. And look at what's happened. June 13th, Leave takes a shocking 19-point lead in the Brexit poll. So they were ahead by 19 points. But then, as soon as this murder happened, as soon as the mainstream media puts out this narrative that this was a hate crime by somebody who was connected to white supremacist groups in the United States, and that hit the very day it happened. Immediately, the Southern Poverty Law Center, as well as some neo-Nazi group that I've never heard of that basically doesn't amount to anything. All of a sudden, they've got all the receipts from where this guy bought everything 15, 17 years ago, 1999, okay? All this stuff surfaces. And we're told that he was doing this as a hate crime. And now what do we see? We now see that Leave is behind by 3 points, 42 to 45. They're not allowed to talk about this. Only the people who want to remain talk about it. They wave the bloody shirt. They talk about how this is a crime of hate. And they have stunned the Leave people into silence. They won't defend themselves. Just like in the past, we had people who were honest gun owners who wouldn't stand up and say, you're not going to hang that crime on me. It doesn't have anything to do with that as a crime. Stay with us when we come back. We're going to talk about this as well as the shooting in Orlando and how that's being used with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we're going to be talking to Paul Craig Roberts right now. He's joining us. And, of course, he served as the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury to the Reagan administration. He earned fame as the co-founder of Reaganomics. He's a former editor and columnist for the Wall Street Journal and Business Week. He's written or co-written 8 books, and you can find his website at paulcraigroberts.org. And I want to talk to Dr. Roberts about these shootings and how we see them being used. Not only the shooting in Orlando, which is now being used again for gun control, and we have people on both the left and the right at the top who are joining into this and saying, yeah, we've got these unconstitutional watch lists. Let's use them to apply pre-conviction penalties to people. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? And the first one we're going to do openly here is going to be take away your firearms rights. And then we have this massive vote coming up in England on Thursday, something that has a big impact on whether or not the European Union is going to unravel from the bottom. There were leaders from all of Europe's, as they like to put it in Reuters, because, you know, if you want to support sovereignty and self-government, that makes you a far-right extremist, okay? They're always identified as far-right extremists. And you had people meeting this last weekend on Friday. You had leaders of Europe's parties, as they call it, their far-right parties, talking about the European Union, urging Britons to free themselves from what they called heartless EU technocrats. And remember, it was Zbigniew Brzezinski that talked about how the world would be ruled by technocrats, and also came up with the 3 blocks that they would then consolidate into a global governance. They would have a European bloc, a North American bloc, an Asian bloc, and then they would pull them all together into a world government, created the Council on Foreign Relations, I'm sorry, not the Council on Foreign Relations, a Trilateral Commission, echoing those 3 areas, and now that's what we see with these trade agreements. Here's a quote from Le Pen from France. She says, the fear-mongering of people like Juncker and Schulz cannot sway us. She said this to a crowd of about 2,000. They're worried that Britain might win back its freedom. We want Britons to set themselves free, and so do we. Joining us now is Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. Welcome.
Thank you.
What do you make of this situation in the UK, first of all? Let's talk about that before we do Orlando. Do you think that Brexit is now going to fail?
Well, it's hard to know what will happen because Obama went and told the British Prime Minister that they would not be allowed to leave. So he's been conducting, that is Cameron, this fear campaign, Little England, how can we make it on our own? And then there was this a murder, which could have been arranged or could have been inadvertent, and that is being used, which is the important part, I suppose, the part we know for sure. It's being used against the supporters of Brexit.
Yes.
The importance of someone leaving the EU, England or anybody, is that the EU is the way Washington controls Europe. It's much easier to control an unaccountable EU Commission than a whole bunch of separate governments. Mm-hmm. And as the professor, I think it was from Georgetown University in 2000, discovered in the National Archive, released CIA documents proving that the EU was a CIA creation. This was reported in the year 2000 in England by Ambrose Evans Pritchard in the London Telegraph. And so the whole political reorganization, reinvention of Europe is an American operation. And it's very much in Washington's interest, both as a control mechanism, but also as the political unity of NATO. Because without NATO, Washington doesn't have the foreign bases to exercise hegemony. Mm-hmm. Yes. Particularly the hegemony over Russia that they're willing to risk World War III over.
Yes.
So for a country to leave would begin, I think, the unraveling, not only of the EU, but of NATO. And if we got NATO unraveled, the chances of the idiots in Washington precipitating a war with Russia or Russia and China would be greatly reduced. People don't appreciate it, but right now, the tensions between Russia and the United States due to Washington are far higher than they ever were during the Cold War. During my entire lifetime, the Cold War, every American president worked to reduce tension with the Soviets. You know, you had Kennedy working with Khrushchev to reduce the tensions over the missiles we had in Turkey and the ones the Russians put in Cuba. You had Nixon opening to China, starting the SALT talks, getting the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty with the Soviets, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. You had Carter with SALT II. You had Reagan negotiating the end of the Cold War with Gorbachev. So all of the presidents until Clinton, but mainly Bush and Obama, worked to diffuse tensions. But now we have these amazing accusations, provocations of the Russians. It's an extraordinary thing to watch. And the risk is very great of a nuclear war.
Yeah, exactly. The situation with the declaration that a cyber attack that they tell us happened, and we have no way to know if that happened, that they say came from Russia, we're now being told by NATO that that would be grounds for a war with Russia, World War III.
Yeah. So you see, that's why, I mean, the real importance of Brexit is that. It unravels NATO eventually, and therefore it removes the ability of the United States to coerce the Europeans into a conflict with Russia.
Yes.
And so this is the importance of it. It's not all the stuff they talk about. They never talk about what's important. And so this is the real issue. You know, if somebody can get out and we can start unraveling the CIA creation, then the chances of human life continuing, maybe working things out so that we don't kill each other off, those chances go way up. So that, to me, is what's important about the Brexit. Of course, it's kind of hard to see the British simply dissolving themselves as a nation and becoming Europeans, because the English system of law is totally different. You know, it was the English who gave us accountable government. It was the English who made government accountable to law, that made law a shield of the people rather than a weapon in the hands of the state. To see all that just disappear and British become some other entity, it's kind of hard to imagine.
Well, clearly I can see it happening even in America, Dr. Roberts, because we have this watch list is clearly something straight out of the Star Chambers. We've been warned about this by numerous authors who've talked about dystopian totalitarian societies where you are charged and you don't know you're charged. Punishments are applied to you without you ever being present at the trial. And essentially that's what we're seeing now with these watch lists that they're trying to bring in.
Well, it's really even worse than that with the suspension of habeas corpus, because they can just pick you up and throw you in the dungeon and never give you any explanation.
That's right.
Or they can simply assassinate you on suspicion that you might be in some way connected with terrorism.
And we've already seen that flaunted in our faces through the NDAA, saying we can just pick you up. The military can pick you up. We don't have to give you any due process. We can hold you indefinitely. We can ship you to another country to torture you or whatever. I mean, this is right in our face, and now they're doing it again, and it seems to me like they've got everybody at the top, both left and right, complicit in this as well. We've got to take a break, and we're talking to Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury during the Reagan administration, father of Reaganomics. He's going to be joining us again when we come back. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host, live in Austin. Joining us on the line is Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. And of course, he was the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury to Ronald Reagan. He's the co-founder of Reaganomics. His website is paulcraigroberts.org. There you can find out about his most recent book, How America Was Lost, as well as follow his writings. Before we get back to Dr. Roberts, I want to tell you that we've extended the sale on Alexa Pure water filters, the 20% off at InfoWarsStore.com. That's all of the Alexa Pure water filters, from the super high-quality gravity-fed Alexa Pure Pro water filtration systems, the really big ones that you see there on the screen, down to the shower filters. And, of course, that's a great way to get chlorine that's been put in your water. If you're on a city water system, get that out of your shower. That's one of the reasons why the shower filter is very important. Now is the time to stock up on the lowest prices. And, of course, the Alexa Pure filtration system removes up to 99.9999% of bacteria, disinfectants, volatile organic contaminants, and hormones. So you can get it 20% off of all the Alexa Pure systems, from the largest down to the smallest, right now at InfoWarsStore.com. We also have the Tim Kennedy special at InfoWarsLife.com. That's 15% off Super Male Vitality, Brain Force, and Secret 12. These are the products that Tim Kennedy uses in his Special Forces and UFC training. That's why we call it the Tim Kennedy Special. These are the ones that he said, as he was talking to Alex, he said, I really can feel it as a professional athlete when I've used these supplements, particularly Super Male Vitality, Brain Force, Secret 12. He ran them through the UFC bureaucracy, and they said, yeah, there's nothing in those that we would ban from any of our athletes using, so that's safe for you to use. You can read the hundreds of 5-star reviews, and right now you can get 15% off those 3 products, Brain Force, Secret 12, and Super Male Vitality at InfoWarsLife.com. That's the Tim Kennedy special. Let's go to Dr. Roberts now. Dr. Roberts, we were talking, and you mentioned in the last segment that one of the key reasons for Britain to leave, that is important for all of us worldwide, is to put some controls on NATO. NATO is getting very aggressive. We've just seen that they said a cyber attack, if they can identify it and tell us that they were attacked somehow and that they identify it as Russia, then they say they're justified to start World War III. We've seen this kind of aggression against Russia as they move into the Crimea as well. The same people who say, oh, we're all for Ukraine seceding from Russia, but Crimea can't secede from Ukraine. I mean, that should tell people something right there, shouldn't it, Dr. Roberts?
Well, it's just part of the neoconservatives asserting world hegemony. So that's a very serious problem for peace, because the Russians and Chinese are not going to submit to being American vassals, like the European countries and Japan and Australia and Canada. So it's a recipe for conflict with 2 nuclear powers. There's no prospect whatsoever of the United States or NATO or both engaging Russia or China, much less both countries simultaneously in conventional war. Even the NATO